Assassin's Creed has been on a roller coaster trajectory for the last decade or so. The series started out on an interesting foot, but I don't think it's used that original formula in a long time, and while some people really like the new, more RPG-style Assassin's Creed game, I haven't paid much attention to it since Black Flag. With Ubisoft on their current trajectory and AAA gaming being what it is in the current year, it shouldn't be surprising that not too long ago, the big U announced a big fancy live service Assassin's Creed game called Assassin's Creed Infinity. And I can't be the only one getting tired of franchise names using a subtitle that means never ending. Seriously, find the new subtitle trend. This one's getting old, ironically. To anyone with their brain still functioning above 80%, a live service Assassin's Creed game sounds like the worst thing ever, and the exact opposite of how to get old fans back. Sure, it'll make tons of money in the short term, but I know I'm not the only one tired of long-running franchises being sacrificed to the dark realms of live service because the publishers couldn't be fucked to put effort into a new entry anymore. But leave it to games journalism to follow the short-term money instead of the long-term integrity, because on July 20th, Polygon published their typical nonsense about how gamers are wrong, publishers are right, boots are a delicious snack, and it's a good thing that gameplay innovation is being sacrificed for a new business model. The article begins thus. 2 weeks ago, the world was introduced to Assassin's Creed Infinity, a service game that will be set in Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed universe. The internet erupted with the same collective groan around service games. They're exhausting and there are too many of them. And while that's certainly true, I'm excited for the potential of Assassin's Creed Infinity, or at least the version of it rattling around in my brain. The recent Assassin's Creed games have trended close to service games already, and I want to see what it looks like when Ubisoft officially takes the dive. Just a few sentences in, and we're already showing our hand here. Look at this wording. The version of it rattling around in my brain. A professional games journalist is about to write a positive article based on something he admits is not real, and that he admits goes against what the general populace is interested in. Also, where do you get off saying you want to see what it looks like when Ubisoft takes the dive? Have you not been paying attention since the Xbox 360? Ubisoft has been taking these dives multiple times a year. Ghost Recon Breakpoint, Division 2, Far Cry New Dawn, Rainbow Six Siege to a degree, hell, even the recent Assassin's Creed games as well, which you even admitted. Ubisoft has plenty of live service games in their library, and while some are obviously much better than others, it's pretty weird for you to throw this sentence in here, implying that we don't have any idea of what's coming. Like we don't have any precedent with live service games from this company. You can expect plenty of time savers and direct purchases and most likely some kind of RNG mechanic because publishers will do anything they can to milk those before they're outlawed. People know exactly what to expect, and that's the problem. We know very little about Assassin's Creed Infinity outside of its existence. Bloomberg, which originally broke the news on Infinity, reported that the game will offer multiple historical settings and get updates over time. We also know that the game won't come out anytime soon and will be co-developed by Ubisoft Quebec and Ubisoft Montreal, the studios responsible for Odyssey and Valhalla respectively. Updates over time is one of my favorite coded phrases for the game won't have shit on day one, but please don't yell at us. Whenever a company openly hypes up the fact that updates are coming in the future, you know you should be avoiding that game for the first few months. Seriously, name one live service game that promoted itself on future prospects and was still a really good game on day one. Beyond that, we can make some assumptions. Will Abstergo, the Templar, I don't fucking, look, I'm gonna mispronounce some of these names because I just don't play Assassin's Creed anymore. If that upsets you, you can dislike the video, I don't really care. It's Saturday. I have fuzzy water to drink. Will Abstergo, the Templar-operated company that created the Animus, play a part in the game? One can imagine how they'd fit into a service game. What? Will there be assassins? I feel comfortable saying yes. I mean, you'd be forgiven for not expecting that after the last few Assassin's Creed games. How about Assassin's Creed's extremely up-its-own-ass lore about gods, ancient relics, and other bizarre shit? I certainly hope so. But past the usual suspects, we can only view the template for the series' most recent games to see what might appear. That template lends itself nicely into a service game like Grand Theft Auto Online, Fortnite, or even Destiny 2. A very curious lack of Ubisoft games in this list. You're talking about a Ubisoft live service game, and then on your list of live service examples, you conveniently forgot about everything Ubisoft has released up to this point. How soon we forget about Ghost Recon Breakpoint. How soon we forget about Assassin's Creed Origins. And I mean, you brought up Destiny 2 here, so do we have to remind the world how that game started out? My point is people hate live service games for a reason, and you beating around the bush here just makes you look like an idiot. The negative examples are right there in front of you, and you're terrified of them. The modern Assassin's Creed titles, Assassin's Creed Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla, all fall into service game traps without actually being service games. Each offers interesting DLC to bring you back into the game months after you've finished. Each has an in-game shop to lull you into purchasing cosmetic items that only you will ever see. Yes, let's talk more about how microtransactions in an offline single-player game are actually super rad. and people wonder why stuff like this keeps getting added to games. But the series' game systems lend themselves nicely into a persistent world. Players collect loot, unlock and upgrade skills, and invest time, energy, and emotion into their characters' stories and gameplay styles. The game's length and DLC means you spend a lot of time with your character, tweaking and perfecting them, only to have to start all over when a new Assassin's Creed comes out. My Cassandra ended Odyssey and its DLC uber powerful, but then I had to swap to Ivor in Valhalla, with no payoff for how badass I made my Cassandra. It felt bad. Yeah, you're describing a franchise. I don't know what you expected. Yeah, when you stop playing a certain video game and start playing a new one, you're gonna have to start over. I put well over 1,000 hours into Gears of War 3, but when Gears 4 came out, none of that progress transferred over, and that's completely fine. I don't even know how many times I've beaten Resident Evil 4, but I don't expect shit from the future Resident Evil games as a reward for that. Yes, RPGs obviously take a lot more time and energy from the player, but that's totally okay, and you shouldn't be expecting continuous rewards from other games that you haven't played yet. Starting a new game means you're starting a new game. Everyone starts on the same foot, aside from maybe something like Mass Effect, where your choices from the last game carry over, or like in a new Halo game where they give you a helmet or something as a little, oh, thanks for playing the last one. You not wanting to grind an RPG is not a valid reason to make said RPG into a live service. You're a games journalist. It's literally your job to play games, and that's somehow still too much for you. Of course, Assassin's Creed is not alone in this, but unlike jumping from one Metroid game to the next as Nintendo finds some bizarre way to shed Samus of her previous skills, the AC games are similar enough that it feels like they should share progress. Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla all have similar combat, a host of side activities, and a union of baddies to hunt down, each themed with their own historical setting. Yes, again, you're describing sequels. Different games in the same franchise with similar mechanics and progression systems, but with various tweaks and upgrades made from game to game. This isn't a hard concept to grasp. The entries are so frequent, unlike the Metroid series, which can take literal decades between mainline titles, that it feels like I'm always playing the same game. Ivor, Cassandra, and Bayek all have different personalities, but the similarity in their gameplay combined with the time I spend investing in each hero makes leaving it all behind that much harder. For the past 3 Assassin's Creed games, I could have been the same hero jumping between timelines, collecting new loot, experiencing new stories, and maintaining some of my investment. Imagining that world where I can continue improving my character gets me excited. Look, I know nothing about Assassin's Creed lore right now. I'm just a dude advocating for better business practices and more creativity in the gaming industry. But what you're asking for here, it seems, is an entirely different kind of game than what Assassin's Creed is known for, which is the exact reason why people were annoyed at Ubisoft for announcing this game in the first place. A traditionally single-player game that has spent the last few entries loading up on microtransactions is now becoming a full-fledged live service game instead of going back to the original formula that made it engaging. Ubisoft is turning yet another one of their properties into a vessel for microtransactions, and it doesn't matter how cool or radical you think the story will be to justify it. It's still a garbage move from a consumer standpoint. It's cool to imagine, say, starting my journey in Assassin's Creed Odyssey in feudal Japan, and then diving into a Mayan civilization in a new expansion without having to start a character from scratch. Games like Valhalla and Odyssey are huge, so big that it's exhausting. Game Journalist discovers RPGs. And I like the idea of a world where Infinity's locations are smaller and more manageable in exchange for being plentiful. So a lack of a consistent overarching vision, got it. A new set of missions and a new location every year where my progress carries over sounds a lot less tedious than starting over every 2 years for another 100+ hour campaign. Again, Game Journalist discovers RPGs. I can stay with a character I care about instead of having to get to know someone new, and I can feel like that investment will pay off not only for the next DLC pack, but years from now. That sword I pillaged from that special event in 2025 may help me get through a tough boss fight in 2029. As a connoisseur of loot-based service games, that kind of long-haul gameplay is enticing. There is so much to unpack here, fuck. First of all, maybe you should be a little more open to getting to know new characters, instead of just sticking with the same one forever. Is that not the whole point of the RPG genre? Second of all, do you really expect to be playing this game in 2029? Because that's generous for any Ubisoft game not called Rainbow Six Siege. Third of all, you say you're a connoisseur of loot-based service games and still have conveniently forgotten every single Ubisoft live service game to come out to this point. It's like this article was written by the Polygon higher-ups trying to secure future Ubisoft sponsorships. Like, there's no way this was written by a single person with no ulterior motives. With Ubisoft's Clint Hawking, director of some of the studio's most experimental games, Far Cry 2 and Watch Dogs Legion, full stop. Watch Dogs Legion was not an experimental game, and really neither was Far Cry 2. Far Cry 2 was certainly good, but a lot of the first game's formula was scaled back and stripped down in order to make it work. Again, Far Cry 2 is a damn good game, but I wouldn't call it experimental. Also, Watch Dogs Legion fucking sucks. On board for Infinity, we can expect some interesting twists to shake the series' foundation. I have no doubt that whatever I think Assassin's Creed Infinity might look like, the result will likely be quite different. But no matter how similar or different Infinity is compared to past Assassin's Creed games, service titles are hard to pull off, and nobody has done it perfectly yet. Assassin's Creed Infinity could easily underserve on content, or overserve on microtransactions, giving players less game while offering more cosmetics. Oh look, the first honest analysis of live service games in this entire article. The game is still too far out to really speculate, he says at the end of a completely speculative article, but it feels like Ubisoft has been trying to make one big game with each iteration of Assassin's Creed. Now that it's officially taking the plunge, I'm excited to see whatever we get next, whether it's a burning disaster or a screaming success. Jesus Christ, is Polygon just incapable of reading the room? Maybe I'm just closed-minded, but I really don't know what artistic merit a live service Assassin's Creed game has, especially after the last few games, which were all basically just baby's first RPG. With how many live service games Ubisoft has launched and then forgotten about over the years, I have painfully low expectations for this one, and anybody capable of pattern recognition should be in the same boat. I will reserve final judgment of Assassin's Creed Infinity for the launch version of the game, but given Ubisoft's track record and the current creative trajectory of the franchise, I'm not holding my breath for anything. But that's all from me today. If you want to hear more from me, you can follow me on Twitter with the tag on screen. You can also donate to the channel with the link in the description. Not at all expected, but very much appreciated. Also, you can check out my punk band, Curbside Anthem, over on the music channel, or you can just search Curbside Anthem on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever. And yeah, that's all from me. Toodles.